Hello everyone, and welcome to our new series on autoimmune disease. I am Dr. Martin Wucher, and I've compiled this especially for my patients so that they can get amazing information. In a nutshell, it's going to be just over an hour, so please sit back, relax, and see what we've been putting together for your autoimmune issues. Just straightforward, there's a warning. This is not medical advice. So please, if you're dealing with immune disease, if you have immune disease, and if you want to treat it, please go and see your doctor. It's not an easy thing to work out, and please never try and deal with autoimmune disease without a qualified doctor. Who's this video for? First of all, for my patients, so that they can go home and look at all the information that's available. Secondly, for people who are interested in autoimmune disease, who are dealing with this, who might have a loved one who's in that situation, and then of course also for my medical colleagues who want to know more about it, who are interested in it, who are struggling with it themselves, and obviously treating patients. So here we go. When we have new techniques, when we have new medicines, when we have new ways of treating disease, one thing that always strikes me, and that is that we always, not always, but sometimes lose track of the old amazing stuff that's been around. So if you want better outcome, never forget that the old wisdom that's been around for over 2,000 or even more years is also incredibly valuable and should always be kept in mind. Let's look at chronic disease. Chronic disease is virtually a modern disease. It's been exploding, and that you could say, in the last 50 years, and we will have a good look at why it is like that. If you look at the American statistics here, it's a crazy situation, because nearly about 3/4 or even more than 3/4 of the money spent on healthcare is spent on chronic disease. And chronic disease are the people that are feeling grotty, they can still walk around, but they don't feel well. And they're called the walking sick. The world is getting sicker by the day. We've got more and more autoimmune disease, more allergies, more diabetes, and it carries on. So why are we going to talk about immune disease? It's part of chronic disease, and it's something that can be very destructive. So we will have a look at where it comes from, what are the drivers, and then of course, which is really important, what we can do about it. So let's go and look at how it is growing. Now, if we want to find out how immune disease are growing or becoming more, a good place to start is with the businesses that deal with it. Now here we look at the statistics of the diagnostics industry. And of course they know they have to be informed to be ready for what's coming, and they should really have good data, and this is where we go. So we come through the back door and we ask the industry. This is what the industry says. The autoimmune diagnosis market, and by that they're really talking about immune disease, is going to grow by roughly about 8.5%. This is crazy. This is nearly 10% a year. And of course the United States are doing pretty well in this one. They're growing with 77% a year. And then Germany and Europe are also not far behind. They are growing like crazy. What does it really mean? It means that we have to really start thinking about it, because it's a debilitating situation. People that have got these diseases cannot work, they cannot function normally. And the question, of course, is why is this happening? Is it genetics, as we often say, or has the environment got something to do with it? I believe it's both. Genetics doesn't change that quickly, but there's a new kid on the block. It's called the epigenetics. In other words, short-term genetics that can, within minutes or even seconds, alter your genome, the genetic material. And that stuff changes the situation in your body, virtually like genetics, but it is stimulated by the environment. If we go back and we look at the age of the Earth, we sort of guessing around about 4.5 billion years, and then about 2 million years back, make it 2.5 million, our genus, in other words, the guy that became human, starting to walk on 2 legs, started developing. Homo sapiens, as we know it today, that is you and me, We started in Africa, and that was only 200,000 years ago. Now 200,000 years might not sound like a lot of time in evolutionary terms, but for us it's quite a few generations. So we spread out of Africa into Europe, and there were the Neanderthals, and we basically pushed them aside. There was some interbreeding between the different walking around on two-leg species, and ultimately they became extinct and we carried on. Then about 12,000 years ago, we started using agriculture. In other words, we picked up seeds that made bigger pods, and that we selected and planted again. We stayed near the Nile, for instance, the old Egyptian cultures there, and then that became our wheat of today. What's interesting though is in those days the so-called wheat, or the ancient wheat, only had about 10% gluten of their proteins. Today we're talking about 80% gluten in our modern wheats. So that's something we'll get back to later on. 200 years ago, that's like nothing. Things really started changing. We became specialists at manipulating and changing our environment, and we became specialists at doing all the things we do even better today to manipulate the environment so that we in big numbers can survive. Let's just go back and look at our modern environment. So modern environment means triggers that stimulate our immune system, that make our body so that it reacts to something. And what has always been around? Now always, you can say we've had bacteria, we've had viruses, and our body has learned over thousands and thousands of years to deal with them pretty well. We've always had stress, but stress long ago was more like a tiger or a lion chasing us, and then once he's eaten us, we were fine. If we weren't eaten, we were still around sitting under a tree or somewhere, and after an hour or two we could relax again. And that has changed. That's why I've put these two little fields here in blue. Because today, through our modern media, through our workspace, we get hammered with stressful emotional inputs all the time, like 24/7. So that has definitely had a big influence. Secondly, all these little goodies that I've put up here, the heavy metals. Long ago they were stuck in some rock. Now we've ground that up, we've molten the stuff, we've purified it, and we've manufactured it into gadgets. We rub it on us, we have it around us all day. So it's concentrated and it's different, and our body knows that because it reacts against them. If you look at aluminum, if you look at mercury and so on, long ago they weren't much of an issue. Now they have become an issue. The toxins that are all around us from industries, from the smokestacks and from industrial dumps, I don't think we need to talk about that here. We understand that. A completely new type of poison that came along was pharmaceuticals. Maybe poison is a bit too strong, but medicines like they were long ago were all encapsulated in certain plant or animal products. Now we've gone and we've changed them. Once again, we've probably concentrated them, put them into little capsules, sold them in pills and in injections and so on, so they've become more potent. And then if you go to the right hand side and you start at the top, the herbicides, first of all we just try to kill bugs, and then we bred our, say, crops that they kill the bugs. In other words, we've used genetically modified organisms to make those plants that they make poisons that kill bugs, so they are now pest resistant. But what we don't understand or often don't remember is we've basically boosted that plant to make anti-biological substances against bugs. But when we eat them, I promise you, those same substances also have an effect on us. We've also gone insecticides, antibiotics, which is really against bacteria. And then of course our foods have been changed so much, sometimes we can't even call them food anymore. Because we are so many and we use the same places for over long times, the areas that we are in have been depleted. I'm talking about agricultural areas that have been planted time and time again, and so they've been leached out, and the substances that were in abundance long ago aren't like that anymore. And the newest kid on the block that is really exploding at the moment is what we call man-made frequencies. Never in human history have we had these frequencies that engulf our body today and trigger all sorts of weird things. I've put in the bottom there sand in the gearbox. Now everyone who's a bit technically inclined will understand if we've got sand in the gearbox, that gearbox won't last that long. It'll grind along and eventually it'll go haywire, it'll pack up. So our immune system reacts to all of this, and it does it 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and then maybe 60, 70, 80 years, forever how many years you will live. It's like teasing a dog all the time, and our immune system eventually becomes hyper vigilant, hyper reactive, and starts fighting everything. And that is the best way to induce autoimmune disease, because now it won't just fight the environment, it'll start shooting at your own body. So let's go back to some really interesting articles. This was from Professor Lerner, a very educated, sophisticated person. This paper was given at the United Nations Congress about 2 or 3 years ago. I'm talking rubbish, about 5 years ago. And he basically looked at our food sources. So here you are. You can read through this in peace and quiet. So if you want to read all these little goodies, just push the pause button, read all the stuff, and then carry on with your video. So ultimately, our food has been changed so much that all these little additives trigger our immune system. And they do it in a really pretty nasty way, because they damage the little membranes in our gut that are supposed to seal off the inside of the gut from the area around it. And this has changed everything. This has changed our world, because our gut is not the inside, it's actually the outside. It's like a sock that's been put inside out. And this tissue is supposed to protect us, supposed to form a barrier. We call it our mucous membrane or barrier membranes. At the end of this article, these are the take-home messages. You can read them in quiet, and at the end it says here, intestinal entry of foreign antigens activate autoimmune cascade. What does it mean? It means little goodies that should stay on the outside, get into the body, and they trigger the war machine, our immune system. So this is where it all starts. So when we look at the science and we hear all these topics here, there's medicine, there's research, and there's biology, there is microbiology, which means bacteria. And then we go back and we say, okay, well, how does this all work? And we've got a specific model. First of all, yes, there might be a genetic predisposition. In other words, you might be vulnerable because your grandparents, your parents, whoever has maybe encountered these goodies, they've been stressed, and ultimately they've given it some of these indicators to you. So now you add bacterial, viral, and other infections, and of course, as I mentioned, the environment, which always teases your immune system. We will end up with inflammation, and I'm going to repeatedly talk about inflammation because it's one of the most fundamental goodies in this talk. Inflammation is supposed to fight off bacteria, and when you make antibodies, for instance, against viruses and bacteria, some of these antibodies don't only work on bacteria, but they might work on some components within your body, and we call that molecular mimicry, because the target is so similar that the bullet goes both ways. It goes to the bacteria and kills that, or the virus, but it also may stray to your own tissues that look similar and it'll kill them. So then we've got an altered immune state, and the altered immune state means that normally your body, who is tolerant against certain things, for instance your own cells, loses that tolerance, he loses the patience, and he starts attacking everything because he is not regulated anymore. And the ultimate outcome then is, of course, autoimmune disease. If we look at this graph, which shows very nicely what would be normal and what's not normal, we've got the 4 big blocks, We've got an internal threat. If your immune system is overpotent, it may tackle some of your own body systems. You can look at this in peace and quiet. And if it's not that bad, if it's against other stuff, it might be against bread, it might be against milk, it might be against eggs or nuts or whatever. In a normal person that's balanced, where the immune system works, can eat nuts and peanuts and all sorts. A person where the immune system's gone haywire can't do that anymore. It becomes a life-threatening situation. On the other hand, if you don't have enough immune system, you get bacterial infections all the time. You have more viruses, they come out, you get fever blisters and so on. You've got Epstein-Barr with all the stuff. And then at the bottom left, which is really inside the body, you have more cancer cells floating around, because each of us has got cancer cells all the time, but normally they will be eliminated within a minute. So if that doesn't happen, things are not as they should be. Normally, if you've got a good immune system, we should have, you could say, appropriate hygiene. In other words, when you've been to the toilet, you wash your hands. When you sneeze, you wash your hands. And all the things that we get told now with corona now are actually normal, down-to-earth hygiene. And they make you healthier if you do them. If you overdo them, they have the opposite effect. So conscious antigen avoidance means you might go and avoid eating gluten. Gluten is an antigen. It's something that stimulates your immune system. Antigen avoidance means not eating peanuts, for instance, not eating gluten, and so on. And then micronutrients are the ones that come from food normally. If they're not abundant anymore, we would have to possibly supplement them. Mitochondria are tiny little power engines inside our cells. They used to be bacteria long ago. They formed a working partnership with our cells, and they sit inside our cells and they create all the energy. What they also do is they are like the switchboard. They switch a cell towards healthy or towards cancer, so they're really, really important. Those little atomic signs that I've put here are areas that are vulnerable to man-made frequencies. In other words, they are affected by your cell phone, by your Wi-Fi router, they are affected by the cell phone tower next door, and they're also affected by 5G massively. So this is something where these man-made frequencies have got a really very important impact onto your body. So maintaining detoxification, that would mean your lungs, you can breathe out certain things, your kidneys, you pee them out, your liver, which basically filters stuff out and detoxifies it, and these things have to work. Diminishing stress and cortisol, so that those hormones are important for our stress response. If they get hammered, they don't work anymore. That influences our immune system. And then we've got there on the left-hand side, inflammatory triggers. So if you want to get somebody healthier, you take away all the things that irritate him. That is really absolutely plain common sense. Immune modulating agents, we'll talk about them at length, are substances that can down-regulate and calm down your immune system. And as we've said, barriers maintain barrier function. In other words, you do something that will improve the function of your gut, the function of your sinuses, the function of your eyes, and so on, your skin. That, of course, is like a membrane protection, and it makes sense to make sure that those are in place. And the big buddies that we have, every adult has between 2 and 3 kilograms of bacteria in their gut. And these are like your neighborhood watch. And if you don't look after them, that thing goes wrong, and it'll turn against you. So commensal bacteria are the good, the friendly bacteria, and you have to look after them, and you do that via good food, healthy meals, and so on. And as I've said, these little signs are areas that are influenced by man-made frequencies, and this is why I've put the 5G sign here. Where do our immune cells come from? You can see initially our tonsils, the thymus gland, then we've got the spleen and also our appendix. That's like the nursery for our immune cells. This is where they're created, and this is where they mature, and this is where they learn the tricks of the trade so that they can fight the wars for us. It's like a police college or an army college. If you want a protective system in society, you need to have a police college where people get trained what to do. And then they move to the body, and you can see on the left here, there's a certain amount of cells that know how to protect you, and you have them the day you're born. And they get supplemented by another one, by the so-called adaptive immunity on the right. And the adaptive immunity on the right is something that will eventually make antibodies, which will create natural killer cells and so on. That is so-called learned. In other words, the basic immune system that you get as a baby, over the next 2 or 3 years, it matures, it becomes better and better at working out what's good for you and what's not good for you. And that system is the system, if it goes haywire, that will create autoimmune disease. This is a different graphic. On the left you see the basic set of cells that you get at birth, and then the adaptive one starts growing over the next 3-4 years, and they become stronger and stronger. And when we get older, from 40, 50 onwards, they become weaker again. And this is why elderly people often have more problems with disease and cancer and so on. And between these two systems, there's a lot of crosstalk. There's a lot of communication. They talk to each other, and they actually work together if everything goes the right way. This is another way. What's important here is what I've marked here. It's called central tolerance mechanisms. In other words, if you have a police, if you have a rugby game, you always need a ref. You need somebody who calms things down and who tells the rest of the team or the group where they should attack and where they should leave you alone. In the police world, it should be pretty clear that you should connect and attack a criminal, but you should leave populations that are non-criminals, you should leave them alone. You shouldn't tackle an old lady, you shouldn't tackle the normal guy who does their shopping and so on. And this is something that the body does, that societies do, that countries do as well. And to have that function properly, we need communication. Any system, whether it's mechanical or biological, communicates if it's working well. The moment communication breaks down, if your computer doesn't work, your software doesn't work, your printer doesn't work, if your car's computer doesn't work anymore, your car stops. And even an old Lister engine has primitive communication by regulating the speed, otherwise it will run away. So, if we look at today's issue and we look at autoimmune disease, we have a situation where the communication is not right anymore and the body starts attacking everything. And it's pretty similar to the situation that we have now in 2020. In 2020 we had a virus came into our lives and it's been blamed for everything. And quite honestly, the actions of the virus are pretty limited. In many ways, they're similar to other respiratory diseases, and that the biggest problem the world faces today as I'm sitting here is the collateral damage. In other words, the damage that is done by governments, by institutions, by the people that are supposed to protect us. And this is why I feel it is very much like an autoimmune disease. It's like the state against the people. And this is a sad situation. I've put it in here because to illustrate to what autoimmune disease is all about. We go back to cells, and remember we had these cells. Now we've got these native cells, and they are created in the thymus gland in a baby. And then they learn to do certain things. They learn to guide inflammation, and yet they use these letters there on the left, and they're called cytokines. Now cytokines are really chemical molecules that are messengers that go to the rest of the body and the other cells, and they tell them what to do. It's like an SMS message or a WhatsApp message. And there are 4 big groups. We've got T helper 1, T helper 2. T helper 1 work with cells T helper 2 work with antibodies, and T17s, T helper 17s are primarily geared at tissue inflammation. And then we've got something very interesting that we'll get back to later on. We've got cells that are called Treg cells. Treg cells are like the judge, they are like the referee on a rugby game, and they guide the whole lot. And if the Treg cells don't work, you have chaos, and as we will see just now. This is another diagram. On the right, you've got the regulating cells in a good way, and then they influence the stuff on the left, and on the left you can see what happens to the cells if they don't behave. In other words, on the right hand side you've got the police chief, and he tells the guys on the left what to do, and on the left you see at the bottom it's called target tissue and effector cells, and they've taken that cell which didn't behave properly and they take it out of the system. And in humans and in nature, that means they basically kill it, they disassemble it, and some of the parts get used again for other cells. So somebody in the body, in a healthy body that doesn't behave, gets taken out so that the rest of the body can survive. And this is how our body functions when it's healthy, and this is pretty much how good societies also function as well. So, summing it up a little easier, at the bottom, if your antibodies in your cells don't work enough, you've got immune deficiency. In other words, it doesn't work very well. If they work too much, the first sign you see, and we've seen it earlier on, is allergies. And then when allergies are gone, it gets worse and you have autoimmune disease, meaning your immune system completely overacts. It's basically gone crazy. All these, you could say all modern chronic disease, have got a sustained hallmark of inflammation. In other words, you will hardly ever find a chronic disease that is not driven by sustained inflammation. And if I say sustained, it virtually means there is something or somebody getting it going the whole time. It doesn't happen by itself, so it doesn't happen automatically. If you can remove all the inflammatory drivers, you really, really calm down the immune system already. So anybody who wants to heal needs to understand you cannot carry on with everything you're doing and think you're ever going to heal. You will not. So you have to change what's happening around us. You have to address what's happening to your immune system and to your body, and only then will you be in a position to change your disease. Why do I say that? If you live in a certain country and you have a certain job and you do everything at home, you eat a certain food, you get an immune disease, just popping pills to calm down and blocking your part of your immune system will not heal you. I'm absolutely convinced, and I've seen it time and time again. So going to the doctor is only half the story. The other half of the story you have to do at home. And most people that I've encountered are pretty much willing to do that. And the ones that do have got very amazing results. Let's go back to the fundamentals of health. Now, on the left we've got gut inflammation, and we've got all the little drivers of inflammation. So we've got gluten at the top, we've got saturated fats, we've got meat, and that creates changes in bacteria. We call it dysbiosis. And when you've got dysbiosis, you've got the wrong bacteria in your gut. They cause chaos, and they end up creating a massive inflammation. A couple of thousand years ago, 2,500 years ago, the old Greek father of modern medicine called Hippocrates, that was his story. He said all disease begins in the gut. And if you go back to the left there, you see at the top it says omega-3 or omega-3, and it's got a little red line with a T on it. It means it blocks that toll-like receptor 4, TLR4, and if that one's blocked, inflammation is calmed down. The same for the apple on the left and some berries there. So they've actually introduced into this graphic two little goodies, omega-3 and phytonutrients that calm down inflammation. Why is it so important? It's important because from your mouth to your bum, you've got a 10-meter pipe, and if you flatten that out and you take out all the little folds, you've got a surface of virtually 2 tennis courts. This is enormous. And between that surface and the surface underneath, you can look at this graph, this picture. At the top, you've got the inside of your gut, and at the bottom, you've got all the tissues where it's bloody underneath that one layer surface of epithelium. So when these cells, they're like tiles in your bathroom, and if these cells all seal, everything's cool. They can decide what goes through and what doesn't go through, but if these little connections between the cells, we call them tight junctions, if they are damaged, it's like the grout between your tiles in the bathroom has been pulled out, and all the water and everything in the bathroom runs through, and the tile will come loose and it'll be chaos. In your gut, on the surface of 2 tennis courts, you've got this system. So you've got all the crazy stuff inside your gut, and underneath, in the bloody part, you've got 70 to 80% of your immune system. And you can see here, there are T cells, there are B cells, all in little lymph nodes called Peyer's patches. And these cells all here work together, and they create an immune response. And this is the biggest immune response in your body. So imagine, if you put junk food in that area, and your gut is not sealing, and all the rubbish from your junk food goes into the immune system, you have a war, you have a fire, you have a felt fire. The system's called GALT, gut-associated lymphoid system, and it's a fascinating story to follow what comes out research-wise, how important this is in our lives. Let's jump back. At the left bottom, we've got a dendritic cell, and that cell is called APC, antigen presenting cells. So that means that cell takes a little piece of a virus, it holds it in its hand, and it goes to the Th0 cell. The Th0 cell is a virgin. It's a young T helper cell who has never seen that virus or doesn't know anything about the virus. So the dendritic cell will take that piece of the virus, give it to the Th0 cell, and then that cell will make either Th1s, which means it'll be working on cellular defense, and Th2, it'll make antibodies, Th70, it'll make tissue inflammation, or it can give it to Tregs, or it can create Treg cells, and they are eventually going to be the referees. They will calm down your immune system where it needs to calm down, and they will boost it where it needs to be boosted. So, when that goes wrong, and when the Treg cells don't do their job anymore, we get immune disease. And ultimately, doctors will tell you that there are over hundreds of different types. What is interesting for me, though, is that the underlying mechanism is very much the same. In fact, the underlying mechanisms all start out the same way. In the end, it means that in each different person you have different outcomes. The one person might have multiple sclerosis, the next one might have vitiligo, those light spots on your cells, or it might attack your thyroid gland, then you've got Hashimoto's, and you've got rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. And you've got fibromyalgia at the bottom. So if you want to, stop the video here, have a look at all these things, and if you're involved in autoimmune disease, you'll probably find an indication here. But there are literally hundreds of different diagnoses. The bottom line is similar. It is similar to a tree that is 2,500 years old, and all of a sudden you see one branch throwing the leaves off, going yellow, the next one, the next one, the next one. I would assume that there is an underlying mechanism. If you throw poison around the roots, it will not only pop out in one branch, it will eventually go to all the other branches. And autoimmune disease works similar. So ultimately, the underlying mechanism is similar, and we can look at it in treating these ways. So we are going to use ITP. It's called idiopathic thrombocytopenia, meaning your blood platelets become too little and your body goes haywire, your immune system goes haywire, and starts attacking your blood platelets. And your platelets in your blood are very important because they make a little clot. If you have got micro leakages in your vessels, say inside your vessels, the tight junctions don't work 100%, your cells open up, your blood would leak out, and then these little micro plugs or micro thrombi would go and seal it. If you don't have enough, then your blood platelets start or the blood starts leaking, and you can actually end up bleeding to death. So it's a serious situation, and it's a tricky one to treat. Platelets are similar to, the sludge that we put in our tires when you've got a quad bike and you ride around in Namibia on the farm. There are little thorns, and these thorns puncture the tires, and the sludge in the tires actually seals it. It's got little rubber pieces which are much like these platelets, and they will seal a puncture immediately. If that doesn't work, if you have antibodies against those, they make a clump, and then these clumps get removed, all due to overactive immune systems. Here we've got a summary. At the bottom here, bottom left in the bone marrow, you see that's where platelets are produced. They end up in the blood, and this is where they do their work. And then ultimately, when they're done, they get taken to the spleen. The spleen sorts the good ones from the bad ones, and they remove the bad ones. So if that goes haywire, the spleen will remove too many, because every single one has got antibodies on, and then the spleen will realize that's not how it should be, then it kicks them out, so you end up with too few. When you go to a normal doctor, when you go to doctors, what they will do, the first shot will be to give you cortisone, prednisone, and you will end up drinking that. Why? Because cortisone basically calms down the immune system, it shuts it down. And this of course works in many cases, and often when doctors don't know what to do, we would just give you cortisone just to calm you down. This works for hay fever, this works for an itchy arm and what have you, and it normally works short time. The interesting part is though that you have to understand it doesn't address the origin of the disease. It actually just calms down the symptoms. And cortisone suppresses your immune system, it calms everything down, and in this case where ITP is the issue, it basically helps you just to get started, just to keep the person out of the threat of dying. But ultimately one has to change something else. If that doesn't work, the next step would giving antibodies against the antibodies that work against the platelets. Let me repeat that. Antibodies against antibodies. The second antibodies are the problem. So the first antibodies take out the second antibodies, so the second antibodies can't take out the platelets anymore. It's a very sophisticated treatment, and it needs lots of research and facilities normally. It's very expensive, and often it works for a while in this case. But ultimately, if it doesn't work, you have to go to the third layer. And the third layer is if you have platelets that are lumped together with antibodies, and the spleen takes them out the system, you can go and you take the spleen out. Now, in my world, that is a desperate step. It works in some cases. It works in about 60% of the cases, but then it leaves about 30-40% where it doesn't work. It's a little bit like driving along the beach. You've got salt water and sand in your disc brakes in the car, and you go to your garage, and the guy says, well, you've got two brakes at the back still, why don't we take out your disc brakes? The answer should really be to clean your disc brakes and to make sure you don't get sand in it again. Other words, once again, remove the triggers, try why the body is doing this, ask the question, why is this happening? Always, 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 and then address the origin. The next one goes to a type of chemotherapy. Now, if you use those sort of drugs, you kill the B cells, and the B cells are the ones that make the antibodies that clog up the platelets. So yes, it works, but it kills all the other B cells as well that you need to fight viruses. Say you have B cells and you want to make a vaccine against corona or whatever. you need the B cells. And if you're on this drug, you can't really make enough B cells because they've been killed by this drug. So it cuts out your long-term antibiotic resistance, which is obviously not something that anybody would want to go for. This is another one. It blocks hormones that regulate the platelet mechanisms, and the result is that the body goes crazy and makes too many platelets. Now, on the one hand, we've got the antibodies that take out the platelets, and now we're pushing the body to make more. Maybe it's a good idea, but we're actually trying to regulate from the other end to make the person better. So also, it's a tricky treatment, and once again, with all these drugs, there would be side effects, and in some cases, they're pretty severe. So the last one is immunosuppression. In other words, you take drugs that knock out the whole immune system, and you see there it inhibits B and T cells. So now you've got the cellular side that's been inhibited, that's been knocked down, and you've also got the side that makes antibodies. So this really kills the whole immune system, and we know this because if there are organ transplants and if you have people on immune suppressive therapy, there are lots of side effects that happen over time. So in this situation, you go back and you say, what else can we do? And what we did, we looked at some old things and some new things. Why did I put this picture in here? Crocodiles are 200 million years old. They are ancient. And they've been like that for all that time. So obviously the design is pretty good. It's like a car that's been 40 years the same, like a City Golf. They still work. It's nothing fancy, but they work. So my take from this and from nature is use the old stuff that works and then add the new stuff that makes it even better. I went and I looked at a lot of articles, and I found this one of Wucher and Kaplan. It was published in 2013. You've got the references at the bottom. And they tried to treat ITP with, number one, hydrochloroquine. And that is basically an old anti-malaria drug, and it also suppresses the immune system. And also they used vitamin D3, and they pushed it up to about 50 to 150,000 units a week. And that's a really interesting one, because this is what we're going to do later on. If you go back to hydroxychloroquine, it's called plaquenil, and there you can see what it does on the right. It's an old drug. It's been around for about 40 years, mainly used for malaria, also in rheumatology. In other words, if you've got chronic joint problems, if you've got chronic inflammation, they also use it because it suppresses it. And guess what? It gets used again, and there's a lot of talk about it with the COVID-19 treatments that are around. The one guys love it, the next one wants to shoot it down. But anyway, that's another topic. So what did we think when we changed our treatment modules? First of all, I've told you already the disc brakes example. This is not the disc brakes. But in mechanics, if a pipe was burst, you would replace the pipe and everything would be fine. Biology does things differently. They take triggers, they change their reaction to it, and we call it evolution or modulation. Now, why is this picture in there? This is Chernobyl, where the atomic power station exploded and there was chaos. People were evacuated, a lot of people died. And no human can really live there 30 years later. This is like 30 years growth. The plants, the animals, the rats, the foxes, the birds are all back. They are fine. They've got no problem. Nature's bounced back. And it's interesting to think, if ever humanity tries to knock itself out, and if you eliminate every single human being from this earth, I don't think it will take very long for nature to pop back and to get going again. Quite honestly, the earth doesn't need humans, it needs nature. So, what did we try and do? Or we're still trying to do it. We will influence the immune system, try and convince it to act normal again. In other words, calm it down where it needs to, but boost it where it should be. just to get some balance back into the system. And if that happens, we could assume that it wouldn't attack its own body. This is another graphic for ITP, and quite honestly, the underlying mechanism is the same for most immune diseases, so we can use it here. We can see in the middle the T-reg cells are down. In other words, they are not enough. And the B-reg cells, the ones that make the antibodies, are also down. And then the Th17s that make tissue inflammation are elevated. So we want to balance that. We want to reverse that, not reverse it completely, but reverse it in a way that it can function normally again. And if we have something that needs to work together, if you've got wind power, you've got solar power, and maybe you've got atomic or charcoal or oil power, there's one crucial element, and that is that control room in the middle. Without that control room, it would be chaos. Nothing will work. So communication, modulation is the crux of all these systems. So when we want to treat, we start with what works. In other words, it might be cortisone or prednisone. Then we remove all the triggers, we adapt the food, we adapt your cell phone use, and. I'll get to that. And then of course we're going to get into an active phase. We want to modulate, we want to calm down the immune system, that it actually starts working again. So how do we do this? We have said already, we use acute phase medicines, which we try and get rid of. We look at the gut and the health of your, call it the GI system, your gastrointestinal system and the membranes. Remove the triggers. We give you certain foods that calm down the system and calm down the immune system. We give you certain plant and vitamins and stuff that also have got a modulation effect. We use probiotics and prebiotics to calm down your gut system. And then we want you to move your body and to get vagal stimulation. Now, the vagus nerve is a nerve that is responsible for calming, for healing, and all these things. And in modern environments, in modern work environments, the vagus is often basically dead. It doesn't work anymore. And the vagus gets activated, it calms the rest of your body down. So breathing exercise, meditation, praying will stimulate your vagus. So these are things that can be used. And then immune modulation, and we will talk about vitamin D3 and we will talk about LDA. And then we've got a third group of treatments. We've got specific, very modern, called bioresonance frequency treatments. I've shown you that a lot of these little goodies that we talked about are susceptible to frequencies. Now, if you put a 5 or wireless router next to it, it'll damage it. But if you put the right frequencies next to your body, it'll actually recover. So we can do both, and we have to use selectively frequencies that either help your body or that destroy it, and we have to make a choice there. So this is a German technology that's been researched for 25 years. We've used it for about 7 years now, and it's really fascinating. So let's go back to the triggers. I'll sum them up again. We've got bacteria and viruses. Yes, normally we can deal with them. We have to look at stress, try and minimize your stress, calm down your emotions, go back to nature, and then all these other little purple goodies are the big ones that we have to address one by one. A practical part would be we start with diet to fix your gut, we reduce your man-made frequencies, we calm down your pathogens, and if your immune system starts working better, it'll actually deal with pathogens. So meaning we could just boost your immune system. You can do it with vitamins. For the corona stuff, we've used a specific mix of vitamins, and also you make sure that you can drink enough water, that your body can get rid of the toxins, move your body and get your lifestyle in order, and then you actually give the body stuff that really ramps up the immune system. VFT is called Vitalfeld technology. It's a German word, and then we've got active interventions that will help us get that in there. So we've got to one major player in treating autoimmune disease, which is vitamin D, and I will explain to you how we got there. We used the patient with the ITP and we ramped up the vitamin D dose very, very high, and that has had really positive effects. And so we've developed it and we've learned a lot from other practitioners. Here is the program that we had. Measured all the basic values, looked at the platelets, removed the cortisone bit by bit, changed his lifestyle, balanced his Th1 and Th2 immune systems, that is the cells and the antibody systems, and then calmed down everything. That was the first one. Then we improved the gut health. We limited the electromagnetic frequencies, which is also called man-made frequencies, and there you see number 3 and 4. Vitalphage technology basically gets used to nail bacteria and viruses, and also to stimulate the body to start excreting what shouldn't be there much more fancy, much more efficiently. Grounding means you get your body in touch with the earth. Why? Because the earth has got lots of electrons that can go into your body, and electrons are antioxidants. So if your body is working hard and if it's burning up lots of fuel and working with lots of toxins, it makes free radicals, and free radicals are like rust. And if you want to eliminate rust, you need antioxidants, and antioxidants are electrons. You can take vitamins, you can eat antioxidants, and those are really molecules that have got extra electrons. And they are electron donors. And if you want to do it a simple way, take off your shoes, stand on the lawn, on a wet lawn, walk on a salty beach, and you get free electrons all the time. And then at the bottom here, of course, you remove all the inflammatory foods and you eat anti-inflammatory foods. Now, what's inflammatory? Sugar, lots of meat, lots of brine. What's good for you is omega-3 oils, more plant foods, and so on. The third phase was really pushing up vitamin D. We will talk about it in more detail. We also had the patients on plaquenil for a while, which was removed, and you can see here, introduce omega-3 fish oil, and then just keep tabs on that specific situation. Anti-inflammatory phytochemicals means those are substances that come from plants, and we add vitamins to them. So on the left top, basically the whole left column is plant extracts, plant materials. And there's one that I've pulled out is quercetin. Quercetin is really amazing because it calms your immune system down. Same with curcumin, it's anti-inflammatory, all these old substances. EGCG is green tea extract. It comes from green tea. So the plants have made all these goodies already, and we can basically just take them from them and use them for our own good. Then on the right hand side, you've got omega-3 fish oils, and acetylcysteine is an amino acid. And then we go down, vitamin A is important, and then of course vitamin D. This is what this talk is really all about. So let's get going. When you look at vitamin D, it's got the most amazing modern research history. It's if there's one silver bullet, I would say it is vitamin D. And if anybody wants to improve their health, no matter what, this is where you start. Get your vitamin D levels in your blood to the right levels. Even if you do that at home, that's easy to do. You have a blood test, ask your doctor, and then get your blood levels to between, say, 80 and 100 nanograms per milliliter. This is a summary. In the middle, we've got the molecular formulation for vitamin D, and we can see all the immune cells where it gets engaged. So here on the left, it shows you it down regulates Th70, calms it down. It up regulates the Treg cells, which is the referee. And at the bottom, same thing. It changes the cytokines, the little chemical messengers, all in all, to heal you, to make your body calm, and to improve your immune system in the places where it must be improved and to calm it down in other places. Now, about a year ago, a little bit more than a year, I came across this guy, Professor Coimbra. He's an amazing person. You can Google his stuff, you can Google Coimbra protocol, and you will find really fascinating stuff on the internet. He's done this for about 15 years already. He's got thousands of patients, and his main focus has been MS, or multiple sclerosis, which is really a disease, an autoimmune disease that attacks the nerve sheaths, and therefore people become paralyzed over a lifetime. It's a really horrible disease, and if you can get it early and you do the right things, especially with this Coimbra protocol, you actually may find amazing results. So the question is this alternative medicine? Now, depending on who you look at and who you ask and at which angle you talk from, some might say it's alternative. Professor Coimbra, he's a neurologist, and he's a professor in I think it's Sao Paulo. He's been doing this, and he's got lots and lots and lots of cases to back up, and he's found if you use it in the right way, it's a fascinating treatment. Now, if you go into a shop in Namibia and you buy over-the-counter OTC vitamin D, you can only get 1,000 international units in a tablet or something. And some of them have got more, but the legal part is only 1,000 units a day. So, quite honestly, if you want more, you probably need a prescription from your healthcare provider. Remember, we talked about 1,000 units. Now, I just want to put in place what Professor Coimbra uses for his protocol. He uses between 50,000 and in some extreme cases even 200,000 units of vitamin D per day. Now, please do not do this by yourself at home, because you can damage your kidneys, you can cause a lot of trouble. You only do that with a medical professional who has had experience in this and who knows what they do. Don't do this at home. If you want to, find a person who can do it properly and then take it from there. So, because the vitamin D method works so well, we've adapted it with all the other mechanisms and treatment protocols that I've talked about already, and we've built our own protocols around it. So vitamin D is not a vitamin, it's actually a hormone, and it's normally made in our skin, and it is made from cholesterol. So a person with cholesterol pills which block cholesterol production in the liver will have more trouble making vitamin D. And also, if you have enough cholesterol and you have it in your skin, you need ultraviolet B light. Now, ultraviolet B you only get at lunchtime, say between 12 and 2 o'clock, because it comes straight down from the sun. The atmosphere at that stage for the sun is thinnest, so the UVB gets through. You will not get UVB in the evening and in the morning. Even if you tan without any clothes on, you will not make vitamin D from UVB. And this is why the European countries and the countries far south have got a problem, because the angle of the sun is such that they don't make enough vitamin D. If you've got a very dark skin, that UVB has got more trouble to get through to the cells that make it. So if you've got a dark skin, you need more time in the sun to get the same amount. Okay, vitamin D is one key element in health. I've shown you here a graph for those who are not healthcare professionals. This might be overwhelming, so just move on. For the healthcare professionals, have a look at all the little mechanisms. It's fascinating. On the bottom right, it actually shows that vitamin D will change the transcription of your gene sequences. So vitamin D switches on and off about 2,000 to 3,000 different genes. So it's a really crucial element. We've always known that it has to do with bone density, with our calcium levels, and it does that via PTH, which is parathyroid hormone. But that's all specialty stuff. I've put it in here for completion, for extra information. So if you're not interested, just move on. Okay, so in this Coimbra protocol, what basically gets done, you give the patient as much vitamin D until his parathyroid hormone starts coming down. And I'll explain it just now. Vitamin D improves your calcium uptake from your gut, so the blood calcium will go higher normally. That also means your kidneys have to excrete more calcium to keep the balance. And then the calcium should actually go to your bones. For that you need vitamin K2. If you do not take enough or get enough vitamin K2, the calcium will stay in the blood, and this is not where you want it. You want it in your bones and in your teeth possibly. So, and if it all works properly, in the end, parathyroid hormone, you see the bottom left, is going down. What it also does, it has a massive effect on the immune system. It improves your T-reg cells, which are the referees. It calms down the T70s. It improves gut healing. It fixes your mitochondria, and it increases basically every metabolic function in your body. So it's a fascinating story. These are the T-reg cells, and here we can see if there are more T-reg cells, your immunomodulation, the tolerance. In other words, a person that eats a carrot, the body now has to be tolerant towards a carrot, so that's called tolerance. It has to understand self-antigens. In other words, it has to understand this is my own cell, I must leave it alone. This is called self-antigens. When a body heals, there are certain tissue types that get eaten up by cells, and then at a certain stage of healing that must stop. If it doesn't stop, you've got a problem. In reproduction, say you want to have a baby, and if the woman's immune system would attack the sperm straight away, you would never have a baby. So there are certain times when the immune system has to be tolerant, and you wouldn't be able to eat any food if your immune system would attack everything you put in your mouth. So there again, the old stuff that we've been eating for many years in its natural way, in its unaltered way, is normally the stuff that our body knows, and it knows, leave the stuff alone, that's friendly stuff, it's good stuff, we leave them. The same for bacteria. Good bacteria don't need to be attacked. In fact, the good bacteria calm our immune system down. If they're around, our immune system knows these are the good buddies, then there are no pathogens, and then it calms down. And if there are T cells that go haywire, that attack the body, the T-reg cells calm them down and they take them away. If you have a group of people and the one goes haywire shooting around, the police will come and remove him. This is exactly what happens in our body. That's the way it should be. The violent parts, the self-destructive part of the body should be removed, just like in society, by a healthy immune system. Right, just some more information. This is also more for healthcare professionals. We've got vitamin K2 and vitamin D supplements, so then the vitamin D improves in the blood, in the middle yellow part, and the kidneys need to excrete more. And at the top you see if PTH is too high, we've got a negative feedback loop and so on. And the dose of the vitamin D's, we can see at the top. There'll be another slide just now. So if you want to look at this in peace and quiet as a healthcare professional, please do. If not, just move on. So parathyroid hormone. If we push up vitamin D on the one side, parathyroid hormone comes down in the end, because the one work together. And the value that we want is the lowest normal value in the range, which would be 1.4 picomole or 15 picogram per mole. So let's look at it another way. Vitamin D levels. Often I get asked, how can you give so much vitamin D? It's toxic, you get kidney stones and all that. If you go into the research and you spend a lot of time, you will find that it happens extremely seldom. And if you are careful and you monitor the kidneys and the excretion with blood tests, that should not happen at all. So there is no toxicity below 200 nanograms per mole. if you test a normal person in Namibia, which we think of as a sunny country, I found values, the lowest value I've ever measured was 13 to about 50. And the ideal values, that are the best values out, are between 60 and 100. So I would love to have something like 80 to 100. Why? Because if you do that, the risk for cancer, your breast cancer, your prostate cancer, your colon cancer, goes down by over 60%. That alone should encourage me to look after my vitamin D levels. And anything below 200 nanograms is fine. You don't need to go above 100 if you do it on your own, but please just keep it between 60 and 100. You'll be so much healthier for that. Good. Let's go back to the same simple system. We have got the vitamin levels on the left, the supplements, and also remember the sun is also a supplement. It can also give me vitamin D. So when PTH is above the healthy range, we increase vitamin D, and if it's below the range, we reduce the vitamin D levels. And that is the most simple way you do this treatment. What else can we do with our immune system? Yes, we've got internal systems that regulate our immune function, and they come from our brain. And what do we do there? We use a drug called low-dose naltrexone. Now, low-dose naltrexone was developed to get junkies of their addictive habits, and that was done in the 70s in America. It didn't work really well, and so they abandoned it for that. And then there was a Dr. Behari. He worked in New York, and he had lots of HIV patients, drug addicts, and so on, and he started experimenting. And today we use it in a low-dose form, low-dose naltrexone or ultra-low-dose naltrexone, meaning you either give 0.5 milligrams or you give 1.5 to maximum of 4.5 milligrams. Now, how does it work? You give it to a patient in the evening before he goes to sleep. That stuff blocks the opiate receptors. In other words, your body makes endorphins at night between 1 o'clock and say 4 o'clock. And if the opiate receptors are blocked, your body doesn't know that it is made enough. So it'll make more. And your brain makes more and more. And when you wake up in the morning, the low-dose naltrexone has finished working, and then you've got a lot of endorphins, and these endorphins work amazing on your immune system. They boost your immune system like in places where it should, like in cancer defense, and they calm it down in autoimmune disease. I've given you a really important link there at the bottom. It's called ldnresearchtrust.org. Please go and have a look. There's endless resources for normal people, for interested people, for patients, and also for healthcare professionals. So take a time and look at it. And then there's a video at the bottom that you can also look at. Take a screenshot, take your phone, take a picture of this, and then you go to the web and look at this stuff. Summary, this is what LDN does. You can look at the bottom. Improves immune functions, the reaction, it makes healing faster. It's got amazing results, and it costs very, very little. And at the right here, this is what we want. It downregulates T17s, and it calms down your immune system. Right, so now we've got to the last levels. We use Vitalfeld therapy, VTV, VT whatever, and we use it in our practice. And you can see here all the goodies with the atomic sign on it react to it. So we've got a lot of places where we can engage, and we use the opposite of 5G. Now we use good frequencies. 5G is a nightmare frequency for the body, and this stuff is the healthy frequency. So humans have actually gone beyond 5G and all the discussion, and they've developed really, really beneficial frequencies that one can use. So what does it look like at practice? You've got a room and you've got all these crazy machines with lots of cables and funny stuff. It's all computerized, and then you've got a bed. Normally a person would lie there. You put these little white goodies under their legs and under their body, and they lie there for half an hour, and they get these frequencies. And then what we also do is we play these frequencies onto water. Now, Anybody not familiar with this will probably think this guy's gone completely crazy. Water keeps frequencies, and there are lots of resources in the internet. This is the fundamental of how water can be used as information storage. Anyone interested in that, they're welcome to contact us and we'll give you the resources. But so when we do that, the frequencies get put into the body and into water, and then the person can use that water over time for the next month. These are just some examples in the machine. It's all in German. You've got lots of different programs that you can use. You can get an idea of what it's all about, supporting detoxification, mucous membranes, and then you can wheel and deal like folders and files. It's all digitized, so it's fantastic, and the patients normally report very, very good results. So the question in the end is, after all this nice talk, does it really work, and what does it do to the patient? Now, I'm going to go back to our ITP patient here, and what happened in January 2019. He arrived and his blood platelets were at 44. They should be 140 or higher for him to be safe and to be healthy. Now, if you get to anything below 50, is virtually life-threatening, because he's got a chance of just starting internal bleedings, and that is a situation where you end up in ICU and you get additional blood platelets from some other blood donor. Now, we did all the things that we've discussed, and then in May that same year, he was normal. His blood platelets were normal, and you can see the graph, the thick red line. He's been normal ever since. He leads a normal life. We've removed all the cortisone. He's still got his spleen, because he was supposed to get a splenectomy. His spleen was supposed to be removed, and luckily that wasn't necessary anymore. So at this stage, changing his lifestyle, doing all the goodies like we've discussed in this program, has helped this specific person to have a normal life. Now, once again, this is one case that I'm taking here. We've got many others. It doesn't mean it works for everyone. But as I've said to you, and as I've said and want to encourage you, the underlying principle is always the same. The body reacts the same. And I believe that going back to nature and letting nature do its thing is probably the best and safest way. Trying to play nature in a body and blocking this and that and the other program is a very, very tricky situation. And often when we do that and we use drugs that are very potent, we cause more damage and harm. In other words, we will block one thing and have good outcome there, and then on the other side we create two new problems. So going back to nature and thinking about why this is happening is a really basic, fundamental way to approach medicine. Why doesn't this happen so very often? Most people are in the mindset where they say there is nothing else. It can't be done. And then, of course, some of us in the healthcare environment, we've been taught all these techniques and we think we know it all. Now, quite honestly, nobody in this world knows it all, and nobody in this world will know enough forever. So we have to understand, we have, as healthcare professionals, as patients, whoever is involved in this field, always go and look, always try and find new ways. And then when you find new ways, you have 10 people telling you it doesn't work, it's dangerous and all that. Do your research, go and find out. And then use your brain and take a calculated risk. Now, a calculated risk doesn't mean you're reckless, never ever. Take a little bit, test it, find guys who've done it, find guys who've tried it, and then you go back and you get to a new way. Evidence-based medicine is a way that basically says you do what everybody else is doing. Now, it has got its advantages because it cuts out a lot of non-safe techniques. The disadvantage is if you do what everybody else is doing, you only get the same results. And if the same results are not good enough, you are stuck in that frame. So once again, think about it and develop new systems. The system. The system is that you go to a practitioner, he does a diagnosis, he gives you a name, and once you've got the name, that's it. Then you get drug A, B, C, you go to the pharmacy, and so it carries on. If it doesn't work, you come back 2 weeks later or 4 weeks later. And this is how the system works. This is what medical aids pay for. This is what people expect. This is what healthcare professionals do. And it's not that they're bad people. Everyone does the best they can. But the time has arrived to open your eyes, to think further and try out new ways. Yes, if you've done something for a long time, unfortunately we're often stuck in a routine. And very often it's only when trouble comes along that routine gets changed. And this is probably a good thing. If you are a negative person, you actually tend to only find people that agree with you. And that gives you it puts you in a frame where you actually have a downward spiral. You cannot grow from negativity. Stay positive. Believe in nature. Believe in your body. They are incredible. It's better than anything humans have created. And our egos, if you have a title, the more papers you have on the wall, the more responsibility we as healthcare professionals should have. And if you think the patient doesn't know, and it's Dr. Google, this is a famous one, we say, Dr. Google, what do they know? I can tell you, and I've learned over the last 30 years, everything that I've given you today, I've learned on the internet, virtually everything. So Dr. Google is okay, you have to pick the right Dr. Google. If I say corruption and greed, if you have a system that only wants to make money, you will only make money, but you won't do much good. I believe there are 3 legs, and I call them fun, value, and profit. You should have fun in what you're doing, you should create value, and also you should make money. Because if one of them is lacking, these systems are not sustainable. And passively waiting for other people, waiting for something to happen by itself, it's not the best ideal, or it's not the best strategy. So take the initiative, get involved, find out more things, and get going. I want to thank you for your time today. It might be overwhelming, it's okay. Go back, take it at your leisure, and share this if you find somebody that might be interested in this. Thank you for your time and for your trust, and I hope you have an amazing day.